welcome to the fourth in a series of videos where we break down our annual State of Selling to Schools report to help guide you through some of our insights on what they might mean for your business. Lance and I have surveyed nearly 6,000 teachers from across the UK. The result is a free downloadable 40-page report that combines insights into schools' problems and priorities for the year ahead and highlights comparisons with previous surveys. Our deep analysis draws new conclusions about selling to schools, all to help you shape your marketing strategy, solve schools' problems, and make more sales.
This video focuses on Chapter 4 of the report, Wellbeing in Schools. We asked teachers the same question about two different groups. How well does your establishment provide for the well-being of staff, and how well does it provide for the well-being of students?
There's only two questions, but there's going to be quite a lot to say.
Yeah.
I think probably what's good first is to provide some context to wellbeing in schools.
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years for us all, hasn't it? And we've certainly noticed since we've been in this role that student mental health or staff wellbeing have been in the news pretty consistently. Obviously, the context of post-pandemic and trying to recover the learning loss that occurred at that time, that's created a lot of pressure in schools and trying to make up from that missed learning that occurred there. And students themselves trying to catch up and readapt to school. On top of that, we've got a cost of living crisis, which is financially squeezing schools and putting strains on their budgets, where they're having to take things away from maybe resources or other areas in order to pay for things like energy bills. And then there's also been teachers on strikes, and they've been striking over issues such as pay, but also workload and conditions. We know that the conditions for teachers at the moment are so much an issue that it's causing a recruitment problem. Where the government is expected to fall short by 47% of its recruitment target for this year. And less staff means more pressure on the staff that are in the role.
Yeah.
So you might have slightly bigger classes, for instance, or you might have non-specialists teaching a subject that they weren't trained in, which puts a lot more workload.
I have personal experience of that. Yeah, it's hard.
And a lot of the planning that needs to go and the preparation time increases. To back this up, the Education Support recently released a report on the reality of teaching. At the moment, they found that 62% of teachers say they're providing more wellbeing support for students. Students are struggling with anxiety issues such as emotionally based school avoidance, which is cited as the main reason for a lot of students not attending school at the moment. So they're going through a challenging time as well. So with that, some of that context laid out there, and we'll dig into more of it as we go through this video. How well supported are teachers feeling at the moment?
Well, before going into that, it's worth just looking at how we framed the question in our 2022 report. The survey being taken late in 2021 when there were still many restrictions of COVID. There was still a lot of uncertainty about what was going on in schools. At that time, the stress level of teachers was 6.5 out of 10 on average. This time, rather than looking at their stress levels, we've looked at how well they feel their well-being is being looked after in schools. And weirdly, the number is the same. It's 6.5 out of 10 as an average. So that's really interesting. It kind of shows that more often than not, teachers feel that they're being looked after by their schools. In fact, if you look at scores of 8 and above, 37.3% of teachers gave a score of in those higher areas. You also do obviously need to remember the lower end. Scores of 1 to 3 were given by 11.2% of teachers. That's still a lot. I mean, that's over 1 in 10. So they obviously feel like their school could be doing more for them.
Yeah, that's a shame to hear. But how does that break down amongst the different groups in schools?
Well, we kind of looked here at the three kind of main pupil-facing groups. So we've got teachers, middle leaders, and senior leaders. So teachers, class teachers, subject teachers, and middle leaders, heads of department, heads of key stage, heads of year, those sorts of things. Those two groups have a fairly similar line on a graph. So they're kind of a fairly steady incline. But about 4 or 5% gave 1 out of 10, and it's kind of gradually finds its way up to 20 or so percent, peaking at 7 out of 10 for middle leaders, and 8 out of 10 for class teachers. But the peak is slightly lower for class teachers. 8.8 out of 10 is about 20% gave it 8 out of 10, and then it drops away. So the very few really gave it above 8 out of 10. Senior leaders, it's a slightly different picture. It's a much steeper incline. It starts low and it stays quite low up until 4 or 5, and then it shoots up and peaks very high, mid-30s at 8 out of 10, and then again similarly drops away for 9 and 10. But that's a much bigger incline for senior leaders on how they feel that they're providing for staff.
So the senior leaders are a lot more positive about what's being done in their schools.
I'd say so, yes, and I'd say a good reason for that is quite often those senior leaders, assistant heads, and that will be in charge of staff CPD, inset, well-being initiatives within their school, and you know it's understandable that someone who works in that area would be looking to promote and say that we're doing well here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's worth in this question cross-referencing another question from later on in our report. And that is the question asking about schools' priorities. And in that question, 52% on average gave well-being as a priority for their school. That's actually down on last year. It was 58% last year, which is quite a drop. 6% is quite a drop. I think probably the main reason for this is other priorities have kind of slid in. So you've mentioned already attendance. You've got things like assessment and grades and things like that are pushing up in that priority zone. Again, looking at the senior leaders, 60.5% of senior leaders chose the option of wellbeing as a priority for their school. That's well above average, as opposed to under 50% for the class teachers and the middle leaders, who just didn't quite see it as such a strong priority at that time.
So even though they're more positive about it, they also say that it's still a priority for them, so they're still planning on doing more about it.
So what could businesses be doing to support staff wellbeing?
Well, this is talking about wellbeing service providers, but also other businesses as well have a role to play when it comes to looking after the wellbeing of staff. And we know there's three main areas at the moment that need tackling, really, and that's things that support workload, things that support retention, and things that support teacher voice. So when it comes to workload, if you've got a wellbeing service that you're doing some training or some workshop, if you can speak to how efficiently it's organized, then maybe it's a package where a lot of training that happens revolves some reflection from the staff or some ongoing planning that takes place. Maybe you've already thought about that and the packages you're going to give to them. You can make that more efficient so staff aren't going to the CPD about wellbeing and then feel like they're coming away with too much workload increase afterwards. We don't want that to be the case, and many wellbeing providers already are doing that. But also, if you're not a wellbeing provider, you could be thinking about how you can affect things like where it comes to like the administrative tasks of teachers, things to do with like classroom behaviour, things that just make workloads reduced amongst staff. That will help as well. And this leads on to retention. Retention is a big issue at the moment. The over 50s, for instance, there's a lot of those staff that are leaving, and we know from listening to things like Teacher Talk Radio that a lot of teachers are saying that in terms of staying in the job, it's the quality of the job itself that is a big driver about striking than pay.
And that group are the most experienced group. They're the people you might, as a new teacher, you might go to for advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Get that support in the role that you need. So if you can show a way that you can support the retention of staff by improving the quality of their work life, not only is that going to be popular with teachers, but that's going to be popular with the decision makers. Because if you're competing with other schools to hire a limited number of teachers that are available in the pool at the moment, then if you can speak to what your school is doing about making the quality of the working day better for teachers, that's going to help you to retain them, and that's going to help those decision makers to want to use your service. And finally, teacher voice. Teachers need to be heard. And if you've got a service that can maybe use surveying or feedback tools to find out what teachers are thinking, and maybe find ways to streamline how you can look at that data as well for schools, that's going to make teachers feel heard, and it's also going to allow for those senior leaders to make the relevant decisions in their local context as well. And when it comes to different providers as well, like if you're a premises provider, you've got a role to play in wellbeing. Like the workspace that you're in plays an important role on how and how your well-being is affected. So that could be everything from air filtration systems, which help a lot of staff to feel less anxious being in a more crowded environment, students too, to making sure that if you've got a coffee machine that's working and things like that. So just taking care of like all the basic needs of teachers.
So for a business that doesn't specialise in well-being, what's a good starting point for finding out more?
That would be the Education Staff Wellbeing Charter, and it's quite a short document, but it's been put together by the government, with the unions, with wellbeing providers and charities as well. So a broad range of people there coming together and agreeing on some commitments and principles that will help improve staff wellbeing. So if you're looking for a place to get started, maybe if you're not a wellbeing company, primarily, then that's a good thing to look at to see what your service is doing that can address those principles and commitments. But yeah, moving in now to looking at students and how well provided for teachers thought they were. What were the results?
The results were uniformly more positive. And it just shows actually as a staff body that they feel that they're really doing their best to look after the students that are in their care.
A lot of focus on that.
It really are. Yeah, I mean, those students have been through the mill in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, as parents, we've seen our young ones kind of start their school life in a very topsy-turvy kind of way. So overall, our respondents felt that schools were doing more. So 8.1 out of 10 was the average score for how staff feel they're looking after their students. 72.8 of those gave 8 or above. And then looking at the other end, 1.3% 3 or below. So it's very few marked it that low, but a massive number, almost double the number that gave it to 8 or above for staff, gave it 8 or above for students. It's always interesting that, I mean, one of the key points from the Education Support Charities report, Teaching a New Reality, that you mentioned earlier, was that the importance of staff wellbeing trickling down to student wellbeing. So you've mentioned one headline figure already, that 62% of staff are doing more for student wellbeing than they did pre-pandemic. 50% are doing more for each other, their colleagues' well-being as well. So that shouldn't be forgotten about. And dealing with difficult pupil behaviour is also at 62% increase on what they were dealing with before. The report also shows that 25% of staff say that they are working 4 to 6 hours extra per week. So that's that's a big chunk of time. That's kind of around 10% more time they're giving to their work a week. So that's all there to kind of back up the data showing the high numbers that educators have scored for how well they think that they're looking after their kids, because they care so much. They look after them, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're kind of just making sure that those children get a good chance.
And if we tap into that data a little bit further and look at specific groups, as you're already good at doing, what do say pastoral staff and SEND staff say about this?
And teaching assistants, actually, I've added in them. So you've got SEN, pastoral, and teaching assistants. These are people that generally work perhaps in a more one-to-one situation with young people, with pastoral care and coaching and that sort of thing. So these 3 groups, they had started very low at numbers at the bottom end, and some very high numbers at the higher end. So SEN staff generally scored their school 9 out of 10. 40.5% gave 9 out of 10.
That's very positive
for how they felt that they're dealing with their pupils. Pastoral staff, 80% of pastoral staff gave a score of 8 or higher. So that's a really big numbers for those people that are there to look after the young people. And when we were talking about communicating with schools, I kind of spoke at fair length about the importance of the Senko there. So do go back and watch that to find out a bit more about that role. So you talked about how businesses can look after staff wellbeing. Similarly, how can businesses help with student wellbeing?
It's a slightly different picture when we look at students and some of the needs that they have. But again, this is something that wellbeing providers and non-wellbeing providers can all be thinking about. And a major area for concern, and has been for a good few months now, is around student wellbeing is attendance. The government recently announced it's expanding its attendance hub pilot with 9 new mats to help tackle this and spread best practice. So they clearly recognise it as an issue. And mental health challenges contribute to why children and young people are persistently or severely absent, which is what they're classified for.
And there's big numbers, aren't there?
Yeah, that's a really big number. 140,000 students miss 50% of school sessions. That's a morning or an afternoon in 2022. And the main driver for this is anxiety, and what's been termed emotionally based school avoidance. So children and young people are more likely to experience this anxiety about going to school if they've got already a pre-existing mental health condition or they've developed one. They've experienced bullying in schools, or they're anxious about the school environment post-pandemic, being around crowds and things like this. So this has been recognised as a genuine condition. It's not just an issue of students not wanting to return to school, but there are mental health and well-being challenges getting there. And those wellbeing providers are well placed to support schools with the resources they need to recognise this. And it's generally found that dialogues with home and family and students are the best way to get students back into school, and setting up plans. But it's not just about getting students back into to school and setting up those plans. It's also about making school as engaging as possible and enjoying as well. So, workshops or external providers that can do things around creativity and physical exercise and can provide that for schools.
So it's creating a buzz towards something, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And it's making, and then students feel more focused in their other classes because they've been able to express themselves during those activities. And again, premises and providers, furniture providers, things like that as well, resources that can make the school environment feel more appealing to students are going to make them feel like they belong there and that they can attend school.
I mean, well-being, it's massively important. It's so important, in fact, that we've got a whole section of our Insights calendar dedicated to it. So if you've got a wellbeing resource that you feel would be relevant for one of these wellbeing events, it could be Anti-Bullying Week. We've just had Mental Health Awareness Week in May 2023. There's a Walk to School Week. We're in the middle of National Smile Month.
Exactly.
So there's so many things related to wellbeing. So that's a brilliant starting point. There's our desktop calendar, which gives some kind of a few dates dotted around, but campus clients can benefit from the full Insights calendar, which gives you a proper in-depth look at what events that you can help support in schools.
It's both those positive campaigns that celebrate things that you can leverage off for timing your campaigns, but also look at the bigger school picture. Exams are on right now. Maybe you want to prepare something in advance of that to help schools with that for their next intake.
So today we've discussed how well educators believe that the well-being of students and staff is being provided for, which has highlighted the importance of staff feeling supported in schools and some of the lengths they're going to look after the well-being of their students. Our next video will look into the ever-developing world of EdTech as we delve deeper into our State of Selling to Schools report for 2023.
Of course, our software campus comes with all of our data and insights baked in, so you can really focus in on the views that impact your targeted campaigns when making your Selling to Schools decisions. Check out our website to see how you can get in touch with a member of our team today.
From the two of us, thanks for watching.